Hello, welcome to the Peace Channel. My name is Mel Lehman. I'm the Director of Common Humanity. The pictures you see behind us are part of our work, which is to build understanding between people in other parts of the world through art. We found that to be a very interesting and helpful way of doing it. Today, we're building understanding with a peacemaker who worked in a faraway part of the world called the Congo. We're discussing a new book called Disarmed, The Radical Life and Legacy of Michael M.J. Sharp. And we have with us today the author of that book, Marshall V. King. Welcome, Marshall.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Good to have you with us. In preparation for this conversation, I read in Anabaptist World, which is a magazine I subscribe to and heartily recommend. I discovered in reading that Mr. Sharp, who lost his life in the Congo. According to this article, NPR reported that 1,600 militia members and 23,000 of their dependents walked away from violence. What an accomplishment. A lot of us work for peace. Mr. Sharp got it done. How did this remarkable young man get his start? And would screen share be a good idea now, or you want to say a few words first?
I can say a few words first. So I'm Marshall King. I'm a longtime journalist and writer in Northern Indiana. And I knew Michael or MJ's family a bit. And then it will be 5 years ago next Saturday. The next Saturday is the 5th anniversary of his disappearance. And then several weeks later, we learned that he had been killed. And so then I undertook a project to tell to do a larger telling of MJ's life and try to convey how MJ found himself in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, putting his life on the line for the sake of others. So with that, I'll happy to engage in questions and conversation, but I'm going to share my screen and walk through a few photos that kind of tell you a little bit more about Michael or MJ. And then, so his family and friends knew him as MJ. When he got to Europe and then the Congo, he was known as Michael because MJ is really hard to say in German and French. So, So I'll refer to him as MJ, but I also know that there are a number of people who knew him in the world as Michael. So you see him here in this photo in the Congo interacting with children and women. And I think this was taken by a freelance photographer for Mennonite Central Committee. And it's just one of kind of the iconic photos of MJ that was used when he disappeared and then following his death. This is young MJ. He was, his dad, John, was a Mennonite pastor when he was born. He was born in Northern Indiana, but grew up his elementary years in Pennsylvania in two different spots, Souderton, Pennsylvania, and then Scottsdale, Pennsylvania, where his dad was a pastor. So there's a Pennsylvania Dutch word called schnickelfritz that MJ was sometimes called by family members for just kind of being a young, rambunctious child. And he always loved fishing. It was a lifelong passion of his. This is MJ with his two sisters. In the left-hand picture is Erin is the one on the right, his older sister, and Laura is the one on the left. Part of a Mennonite family, and the siblings, found their way through this world together as their parents moved to various communities to do work. So when MJ was in junior high, he moved to Northern Indiana, first to Middlebury and then to Goshen, Indiana. I know at least one of you, Catherine Ashelman, is on the call, and we live here in Goshen. Where I'm standing in my basement office is actually about 100 yards from where MJ lived when he was in high school. So he went to Bethany Christian and was known as a master of pranks. He did several pranks there that gained acclaim for him, but the big one was hacking the bell system at this Mennonite high school and running wires with some buddies down the hallway into an empty locker. And then when no one was looking, they could cross the wires and trigger the bells just kind of causing mayhem in this school. Schools we know are kind of regimented and run by the bell system, and MJ found a way to kind of disrupt that, and inevitably confessed, and was disciplined to a small degree, but that bell system prank is one that people have continued to talk about, even 20 years later. So Andy Gingrich, one of MJ's good friends and high school classmates, one of his best friends, had this quote. So there's a beer named School Bell Stout being served at Goshen Brewing Company in MJ's honor, and some of the proceeds from the sales of this beverage go to his scholarship fund at Eastern Mennonite University. And for that, Andy wrote up a piece, and I just love this quote because it talks about MJ's gift to lead and inspire others around a common goal, even if it was a prank. And so he used those abilities, and first it was pranks, and then later it was peacemaking around the world. So I kind of like this quote as a descriptor of how one does that work. MJ went to Eastern Mennonite University and spent 4 years there doing more pranks, working as a student journalist, and graduated with a history degree in spring of 2005. And then from there, he went to Germany with Military Counseling Network, and was in Baumental, Germany, near where about 70,000 American soldiers were stationed at the time due to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so Military Counseling Network was set up by the German Mennonite Peace Committee to kind of walk along soldiers or help soldiers who wanted to declare a conscientious objector status. And so MJ and one other colleague in this small program would work with these soldiers. And here you can see MJ on the right, and a soldier who I believe is named Robert Weiss. And then to Robert's left is a guy named Tim Huber, who was one of the people that MJ did this work with. Tim, coincidentally, is one of the people who wrote those Anabaptist World, is the guy who wrote those Anabaptist World articles that Mel referred to. So decades later, Tim is writing about his former coworker, MJ. But these guys would walk alongside soldiers, even go to military trials with them as they were sentenced for going AWOL. And so MJ was kind of really, to use a military phrase, boots on the ground. And one of the guys that he did it with before Tim Huber referred to being a brother in arms with MJ as they did this work together. So it was really formative for MJ to do this work in the years right after college. And then he ended up getting a graduate degree in peace studies in Germany from a German university. No small feat to get a graduate degree in a foreign language, but by having to do most of it in a foreign language. So he got that graduate degree and then came back to Northern Indiana for a couple of years before taking on a new position with Mennonite Central Committee in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. MCC, which does relief work around the world, needed someone in Eastern Congo, here near the Rwanda and Burundi border, and along that long, thin Lake Kivu. And so MJ worked there. Because of the Rwandan genocide in 1994, there are about 100 armed groups in Eastern Congo, still trying to battle their way back into power, or holding on hope that things can go back to the way they were in the good old days. And so MJ had a couple roles with MCC, and one was to distribute school fees so young people could go to school. He helped distribute and administer some programs that did food relief. He visited internally displaced persons camps. There's about 5.5 million people who were displaced by violence in the Congo. So MJ was doing direct aid and work with a number of these people. But then he was also going to visit some of these armed groups. And so but MJ did this work in the Congo for 3 years.
And if I could jump in for a second, these are wars that were fueled by valuable minerals and rare metals.
Primarily, I mean, it's always about money and power. So there are some of these armed groups are really, they just want to get back into power in Rwanda. But in Eastern Congo in particular, there's a lot of, copper, coltan, and gold, and some of these cobalt. These are all things that we carry around in our pockets, in our cell phones, in our lithium batteries, in the hybrid cars that we love driving. So we are connected to this violence in many ways. And so, yeah, there's a lot of mining in Eastern Congo, not all of it, some of it on the black market, and the control of those mines and how this mining happens often is money that then fuels this armed conflict. So MJ, shown here, was comfortable first in Germany. He hunted with his grandfather in Indiana, but he was comfortable around guns, but was still an unarmed peacemaker when he did this work in the world. And then he joined in 2015 the UN Group of Experts, which works on behalf of the UN Security Council to investigate so that they can enact sanctions if needed. And so MJ joined this group and as an armed group expert, and then undertook investigations on where these groups were getting their guns and armaments, and who potentially was causing more of the drama or stress or violence in the country. And so he did it for a year, and then the second year he was appointed as coordinator of this armed group, or as this group of experts, kind of the leader among equals. And he's shown here in this photo with Christoph Vogel, who the second year was the other armed group expert on the group. And then there were 4 other people on the group who did finances and mining or crimes against women and children. And so everybody kind of had their focus, and then they would come together and write these UN reports after years of investigation. So Michael shown here was Zaida Catalan, who was a Swedish woman who was a rising star in the Green Party in Sweden, ran for parliament and lost, but surprised a few people. But then she quit politics, frustrated with the rate of change it could bring, and went into the world kind of as a consultant and teacher, and someone who worked to help protect women and children. She did that in the Middle East, in Afghanistan, survived a suicide bombing in a police station there, and then ended up in the Congo doing some of this work, and joined the group of experts with MJ. And so in late 2016 and early 2017, there was a conflict in central Congo between government forces and a tribal group, and they went to investigate this. They went to investigate how child soldiers were being used in this conflict. And they knew of the risk, but they were taking great care. This is a photo from Zaida's phone from March 11th, 2017. And they gathered in a hotel where they were staying in central Congo with some representatives from this tribal group, Kamawina Nsapu. The man next to Michael there wearing the hat is an elder from this tribal group. And then the others are translators or fixers that MJ and Zaida were working with. In French, we know from a recording Zaida took that day that Michael asked if they could safely go visit this group the next day, if they could do that without fear of harm. And the question was translated into a local dialect to the elderly man, and he said, "No, that would be a bad idea. They should not do that." And the translator said, "Yeah, you'll be fine if you go." So this was part of a plot to basically set them up. And so on March 12th, they got on motorcycles and they left to go visit this group. And then late that day, they were missing. It was unclear where their whereabouts were. So on the map, Kasai Occidental is where this happened. So this is not a part of the Congo that was used to UN investigators. It's a little more remote. They don't get researchers there or investigators there or NGOs working there in the same way that Eastern Congo does. But we know now that basically the Congolese Security Service, the ANR, which is kind of like a combination between the CIA and the FBI as we would know it, was involved in planning their deaths. I didn't know that at the time, but that's become clear in the years since. So a little over 2 weeks later, Michael and Zaida were found in a shallow grave by UN soldiers in the Congo, and that worked. They worked to get their bodies back to their families. And when they found the bodies, it was seen that Zaida had been decapitated. So MJ was both had been shot, but Zaida had undergone something much more horrible as well. And then in April of 2017, the Congolese government called a press conference and showed a 6-minute and 17-second video of their deaths and of her beheading. This was shot on kind of a shaky cell phone camera and showed a bunch of men with them that day, leading them. Michael's engaging them in conversation, and then they're killed. So how that video was taken, how the government got it, those are still mysteries even 5 years later, but it's clear that there was some government involvement in their deaths. So we know that they were deliberately misled, as I explained a little bit earlier. And so soon after this, I started this project to tell the story of Michael and who he was in the world as a peacemaker, and also Zaida's story a little bit as well, although the focus is less on her. But there's a friend of hers who's a professor in Sweden at a seminary there, named Brian Palmer, and he refers to this as civic courage, where these are people who've put their lives on the line on behalf of others. And so you've seen this. There's a woman named Annie Funk, a Mennonite woman who was on the Titanic and gave up her seat in a lifeboat for someone else. There's the folks who were in the concentration camps and volunteered to go to the gas chamber so the father of children could be spared. One of those men who experienced that just died in the last few years in his 90s. So that evidence of civic courage is something that Michael and Zaida exhibited in this world and changed the lives of others. As Mel said, I mean, in MCC, MJ worked for a Congolese Protestant Council of Churches program that worked at repatriating these people back, these combatants and their families back into the world. And Michael wasn't responsible for all 1,600 of them and 23,000 civilians, but he came on in the last 3 years of that program and did remarkable work. And the majority of those happened during those 3 years that he was involved. This is, I mean, in the Congo, you travel muddy, rutted roads. You can use Land Rovers and they get stuck and you push them out. Michael liked to use motorcycles and travel with his coworkers, Congolese coworkers, and be one of them. And this is one of the pictures after a long day of writing that shows him just how hot and tiring that work is. We can talk about whether he's a martyr. I choose not to call him one. This is Dirk Willems, a Mennonite who went to rescue his would-be captor from the ice. And, you know, there's a conversation there's some exploration toward the end of the book about whether MJ was a martyr. But I choose not to call him that. So the book is in the world. People are able to read it, and the conversations around it have been remarkable. I continue to encounter at just about every event I do, somebody who had a connection to Michael or to the family somehow. As Mennonites, we're a really small tribe here in North America. But I'm pleased with people being able to read this story and engage the story and learn more about this remarkable young man who died tragically at the age of 34. So.
Well, thank you so much. You have said that you would not call him a martyr, and I think that's well put. What would you call him?
I mean, I think you can make a case to call him a hero. You know, we don't not a hero with a cape and, you know, the ability to spin webs, or not something that would appear in one of the Marvel Comics movies. But I think you can make a case that that he was hero. He was clearly a gifted peacemaker, and I think he was just a remarkable young man who used the tenets of peacemaking to make a difference in the world in ways that were powerful and actually had an impact on people's lives.
We have a spot here for Q&A. If there's anyone out there in our audience who would like to ask a question, we would welcome that. What, Marshall, has this changed in your thinking? Is there something that you sort of had an aha moment where you've been a peacemaker, you're a folk who's been caring about the world? Is there something that clicked at one point and said, yeah, I now more fully understand that?
Yeah, I mean, I was drawn to the story and feel like it called to me, and I chose to do the story in part because I felt like Michael was somebody who had gone into the world to do the things that we talk about as Mennonites and Anabaptists, to actually go and undertake that work. And it notes a shift from that kind of quiet in the land, I'm going to stay here on the farm, to going into the world in a different way. And there are generations that led up to that. I mean, there are the folks who did 1W service and came back and started mental health hospitals in their communities. I mean, so Mennonites have over the years kind of taken these steps away from just being, simply staying at home. And Michael really kind of took that to the utmost. And so, I mean, not just going and working for MCC, but then going to work for the United Nations. And so, the aha moments are, well, one is that as Mennonites in North America, we're a really small tribe. The other is studying some of the kind of trying to figure out where to put Michael in the Anabaptist context really helped me understand where maybe I fit in that context, helped me understand the history, the last 500 years of history that we've come from, but also what it might look like as modern Christians or Anabaptists, or even just people caring about how to do peace. So, and the complications and the messiness of that, I'm probably I probably have a better sense of that complication and messiness, but also more assurance of where I might fit into that and how I might do that in this world.
And we ask all of our guests on the Peace Channel the following question: what can we do for peace? The Congo is a long ways away, half a globe away, and it's a very different world. And what a remarkable story of MJ and his incredible courage. Most of us haven't been traveling recently, and most of us won't get to the Congo or even some other part of the global south. What can we do right here and now? What can each of us do for peace in the week ahead?
I mean, MJ was, I mean, there are folks that he worked with that didn't even know he was Mennonite, but they knew how gifted he was at listening to other people. And in that NPR report that you mentioned, Val, I mean, he tells the reporter, you can listen, you can always listen. You can always listen to someone tell of their view of the world. And that's really what he did with these warlords of the armed groups. That's what he did with his friends and his family. That's what he did with the Congolese co-workers that he worked with, and he worked with them and in the way that they worked. He didn't need to add to, he didn't need to put on airs with that. So we don't need to go to the Congo to be a peacemaker. It can mean speaking up at the family dinner table when one of our relatives makes a racist comment, or it can mean talking to our neighbors and engaging our neighbors rather than just muttering at the political signs that they have in their front yard. So I think there's a real opportunity here for all of us to try to to hone that listening skill and being okay with difference, and not feeling like we have to convince someone to believe the way that we do, but we can still honor them and where they are, and engage them and build relationships with them, even if there's kind of differences that we would never bring together.
We are getting towards the end of our half hour. Is there anything we haven't talked about yet that you'd like to add before we wrap things up?
I mean, I think I'm pleased with I'm grateful for the folks who have shown up today to take this in. I'm grateful to you for the invitation. And I'm also, I mean, I hope that this is a story that people find engaging. It's, it's tragic on one level, and some of the things that they were investigating shows the depths that humans can go to do harm to others in this world. But yet the story continues to give me hope, because there are folks who in small ways in their communities and in their neighborhoods, and in small ways and large ways on the other side of the globe, are doing this work to bring about peace and help others learn those skills as well. And by planting those seeds, they can take root over time. And that's what MJ did, and I'm grateful for that.
Thank you, Marshall King. So the takeaway here is buy the book, read the book, take it to heart. We might also note that Marshall King is a part-time freelancer. And if you have a freelance assignment or a book that needs written, or a project, you might contact Mr. King. You can contact Mr. King through commonhumanity.org. I will relate the message to him. And while we're talking about commonhumanity.org, that's our website, please go there. You will see some beautiful art. You see a little bit of the art behind us. Much of what we do is try to build relationships, peace, and understanding with people in the Middle East. And we do that through art. We have some upcoming programs. Please come back and see us again. We're doing these programs twice a month. In 2 weeks, we're interviewing Jonathan Katab, who is a Mennonite peace activist of Palestinian heritage. And he's written a book, Beyond the Two-State Solution. We're going to find a very interesting discussion about that in 2 weeks. A month from now, on April 2, we're going to be interviewing an artist, a young lady named Arwa Albore, who is an Iraqi artist, and she's going to be discussing her work. Again, if you go to commonhumanity.org, we have programs. We have a very interesting peace seminar, which we would be glad to offer to your church, to your school, in which one of our artists who survived bombing in Baghdad, I happened to be there, I never met her until years later, but she was bombed in Baghdad in 1998, and I was there in the same time as a humanitarian worker. We talk about that experience and learn from that, and how people can work for peace. We have posters for sale. We have reached our half-hour minute limit. Thank you very much, Marshall King.
Thank you.
Great to have you with us. I look forward to continuing our discussion, and have a great rest of the weekend. Thank you. And we'll see our audience back in 2 weeks.
All right. Thanks all.
Thank you, folks, very much. Bye-bye.